My name is Mark Nafe, SE Manager, Midwest Canada for CyberArk. We have normal CyberArk privilege account security, obviously on our website and whatnot to look at a little bit more. To start, I'm going to do a quick background on what we've done so far and what hackers are using today, what tools they're using, and what code they're using. Kind of get a little bit of insight into what they're trying to get to and how they're getting there. At the end, I'm going to wrap through really quickly the target attack. I'm going to run through a couple of different areas of what people use and when they use code to get into that. Very informal. If you guys have a question or something like that, just give me a shout. When the internet first started up, what did we have? We had firewalls. Why do we have firewalls? Well, we wanted to keep people out of our network. We want to kind of call ourselves, this is my network, this is my space, well, I mean my network. So you got your DMZ, you got your firewalls. You're going to build a great big moat, a great big wall. But what ultimately happens is you kind of realize that sooner or later they're going to get through that wall. Sooner or later they're going to get either a spear phishing, they're going to do some kind of attack to get through that. We decided that antivirus, maybe DLP, some other scenarios within our environments, they're going to get onto that machine, but we want to stop them at that machine. Well, some of the issues with this is that as a hacker, I can get in and I can change my code. I can solve my code. There's different things I can do to make it so that my stat files on an antivirus no longer recognize the code that I'm running. When we look at a lot of the attacks that have happened, all of them pretty much come down to they're getting some form of account, and in order to get that account, they have to go onto an individual machine to scan it. And that's kind of where we're at today. Today we have the keys to the kingdom, very high-level accounts, and hackers are targeting to try and get that high-level account. This is on a corporate basis, obviously. So if I'm a hacker, I want to get onto an individual machine. I'm going to launch malware. I'm going to do spear phishing. I'm going to get onto that individual laptop. But my key, my goal, is to get off the laptop and into the rest of the kingdom. In order to do that, I need to get a key, and that key ends up being a privileged account. A privileged account could be any one of a number of different things. It could be a domain controller. It could be a local administrator. It could be any one of the firewall accounts. Pick your pick. Every hack that we look at, whether it's the SANS, Target, Ashley Madison, they all kind of leverage the same methodologies. They all kind of use the same thing. And it could be different people. It could be a state-sponsored hack. It could be some financially sponsored, looking for credit cards, healthcare records, and whatnot. Our first step right down here is we're going to try and get a breach. Okay, the breach is going to be some way to get onto an individual machine. When we look at a lot of the attacks, people will not necessarily try to breach the main target. They're not going to try to get the main corporate environment. They're going to look for vendors. They're going to look for side networks. They're going to look for IIS servers that have been stood up that are not protected. Okay, we're looking for some way to get in, and that breach is going to be usually on some ancillary type of system. Once we've got onto that individual system, our next step is to, from a farming background, we're going to plant some software. That's up in the top corner there. When we plant software, we have multiple ways to do different types of software, and we can bundle software. We're going to leverage your resources, your computers, to do our work for us. Some of the smartest hacks that we've seen, people have actually taken code and recompiled it within your network to re-attack your network. Okay? Once I'm in, I have your resources at my beck and command, but ultimately, when I'm planting software, I'm looking for credentials. I'm looking for some way to move laterally across the organization. I'm looking for some way to move beyond that initial target. I want to get to the next step. And how am I going to do that? I can use certain pieces of code for certain types of machines, certain types of environments to get those credentials. Every single hacker uses the same techniques. Once I get those credentials, I'm going to do a couple different things. I'm going to, number one, try to use those credentials on further machines, right? So maybe those credentials are only good for a few machines, but I'm going to try and use those credentials. Number two, I am going to take username and passwords. I'm going to build a nice dictionary file, and I'm going to continually grow that dictionary file with those username and passwords. The next machine I attack, I have a couple more accounts. The machine after that, I'm going to have a few more. And I can grow my dictionary file bigger and bigger and bigger the further I get into the environment. Again, there's slightly different pieces of code depending on what I want to get to. If I want to do a Windows system, I'm going to use Mimikatz. If I'm going to go to Oracle or databases, I'm going to use a slightly different piece of code. So, how does it work? Let's look at our breach. If I'm going to hack somebody, first thing I want to do is I want to find a field, right? I want to look at the value of the target. What am I trying to get? Am I getting a credit card? Am I getting healthcare records, which go for $30 to $100 bucks? Credit cards aren't worth as much anymore. What do I want to get? Do I want to deface your website? Do I want to shut down your servers? What do I want to get? And that determines what I'm going to try to breach with. The value of the target is important, obviously. Some are more expensive than others. And then we want to look at whether it's state-sponsored or an individual. Based on that, I'm going to look at different tools that I could use. Phishing, USB, you guys have already seen all these. And once I've done that, I'm going to plant the software. Some of the seeds that I'm going to plant, Mimikatz. How many people have heard of Mimikatz? I'm pretty sure everybody has, right? We'll run through that real quick. If you guys want to get into more detail, we can, into Kerberos, into Pass-a-Hash, golden ticket, silver ticket. Does everybody know about Pass-a-Hash? Yeah. Some people, maybe not. So we'll maybe run into a little bit of detail on those. So those are kind of the main ones that we're talking about. These are Windows vulnerabilities, authentication into the AE infrastructure. Zeus, this is a very old piece of code. Both of these are like 10 years old. So we got Zeus, SpyEye, Citadel, Carver, all those kind of things. Those are all derivatives. Essentially doing the same thing. When you look at both of these, they're all looking for some kind of account that I can get. Okay? Obviously, we have our network listening, packet capture. There's different ways to scan the network. That's what a lot of people focus on, but it's typically not the priority focus of the code that hackers are running. Okay? Everybody focuses on, oh, it must be the network. It must be a DDoS attack or something like that. Honestly, most people are looking for accounts. They're not really looking for network vulnerabilities because they already know that port 137 is available and they can get wherever they want to go. It's not the issue of going somewhere within the network. Once they're in, it's a question of how do I get onto those valued targets. Okay? Key logging, obviously, and SSH keys we'll talk about a little bit later if we need to. Once I've gotten my code, I've launched it, and I'm running in your environment, I'm looking for credentials. Okay? If I get a credential, I can go ahead and move further into the environment. I want to get as far as I can, or ultimately find some valuable data. I'm going to try to export that. Okay? Even if I do export data, what am I going to do with it? I want to continue that attack as long as possible before I alert you guys. Right? There's two different types of attacks. There's a stealth attack, and there's an attack that is deliberate and often will push triggers. If I'm a smart hacker, I will not send off those triggers, and I will be running in stealth mode. You guys won't see anything. Most of the attacks that we find, the hackers actually get caught as soon as this data tries to go out of the data center. So I can stay in your environment for about 200 days. The average attack is somewhere between 100, 200, 300 days. I can stay in that environment for quite a while before I actually get caught, and I want to stay in stealth mode as long as possible. If I get a good credential, that's great. If I can create a credential, that's even better. Right? So if I can hack your domain controllers and I can create my own credentials, I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, right? Perfect. And then ultimately, because we're computer guys, we all know that we can copy and paste. So I'm going to take the code that I have, the code that's working, along with that dictionary file that I've created, and I'm going to copy and paste that as many times as possible on as many servers as possible. So now what I'm doing is I'm leveraging your servers to work for me to reach out to other servers to get further into the environment. It's a continual process. We're constantly doing this. However, every once in a while, we're going to find that there's a valuable target that we know has sensitive information. Let's say I find that SQL database. And I know this database server is big. It has a huge data store, maybe a terabyte. And I just want to get that terabyte of data. Because I know within that terabyte of data, there's going to be some juicy tidbits for me. In that case, I'm going to deploy different pieces of code targeted specifically for that machine that I probably think might work in order to get to that machine. Okay? Again, most of it's going to be around account harvesting. Maybe I'm going to put a Wireshark on there, and I'm going to listen to packets going to and from that target. right? Inside of those packets, how many people have coded an application that needs to reach into a database? Or even if you guys have an application that needs to reach into a database, how many people put in a password rotation scheme within that code? Nobody does. Every time you see a third-party app reaching into a database, there's going to be a username and password inside that code that gets sent along the wire in clear text. If I want to get a database, I can put in code that will listen to the wire. I'll see that packet, and I will know what the username and password is for that database. Very easy hack. Very simple to do. Okay? So if there's something I see valuable, if I see a big database with a terabyte, I'm going to launch that. I'm going to find that username password, and I'm going to be able to get free and clear into that database. I can run SQL Manager on a different machine. I know the username password. I'll log in with that username password and go and retrieve that data, put it onto your file server. I'm going to let it sit there for a few months while I hack the rest of your systems, and then I'll send that data off. Because I know that once I start sending a terabyte of data across the wire, every alarm in the building is going to go off. We also want to store our information, right? How many people know how long a dormant piece of code will go into the environment and just stay there? Could be years, right? When I won't say who, hacked the Iranian nuclear, right? Does anybody know how long that code stayed dormant in their environment before it is actually activated? Okay? Somewhere between half a year to 2 or 3 years. Okay? It was there, resident and dormant. While they were investigating other parts of the environment, dormant code is a very big danger. How many people put out malware attacks? If the malware didn't raise its ugly head and it just ran as a service in the background, how many people would be able to detect it? Right? How many people have restored from a backup tape from a time when maybe we had malware in an environment? Did you scan that backup tape for malware? Right? For keyloggers? You just scan that? So there's instances where we will restore from tape and we'll put stuff back into our environment that maybe it was gone. Right? Ultimately, though, it all comes back to sending the data. Right? So let's take a little change in pace a little bit. We've got about 15 minutes. If you guys have questions, feel free. You having fun? Question? Yes. It's not as frequent, but you will see it occasionally. More common, you will see dormant code. So if you have a hack, let's say they actually get into a few machines, and it's a silent hack, they're not advertising that they're there, you will see them place code into the various locations that allows them a backdoor later on. Okay, so that's more common, but you will see occasionally that code inadvertently gets backed up, right? You're backing up your server, your file server, whatever it might be, that code stays there. In case you do wipe out the code, it'll come back again. And obviously, you spend a lot of time with your antivirus and your hacking registry and all that kind of stuff, trying to get that stuff out. But ultimately, there may be legacy stuff somewhere. And you don't know what's going to trigger it. Maybe it's a time bomb. You don't know. Right. Any other questions? No? Yeah. All right. So we got about 15 minutes. Let's go through target breach real quick. Everybody's heard about it multiple times. I just picked the target breach because everybody knows it. All the latest ones, they're all using the exact same Madison, take your pick. They're all using the exact same techniques. They're going to do an initial breach. They're going to go and find a field to hit. And ultimately, what they're going to do is plant some code that's going to get credentials. Once they get the credentials, then they go and they do whatever they want. Sorry about the cutoff on the top. So roughly the target they looked for a few weeks, whatever, clients could find. Ultimately, their motivation was to get some credit cards. Different companies with different motivations. Actually, Madison was to destroy the company. So they tried the main core target site they couldn't get in, and what they did find was Fazio. Everybody know who Fazio is? You guys probably studied this. You've read up on it. Fazio is a air conditioning, heating, cooling system. And what they do is they run all the target scores, and they do it remotely. So they need to VPN in, and they need to use remote sessions into the main corporate target site in order to do a lot of the information. So what they found in order to get into Fazio is they did a little phishing attack, a secure phishing attack. They got into individual computers, individual's computer in Fazio, and on that computer they ran Citadel malware. Okay? Maybe you know Citadel, maybe you don't. It's old. Citadel's been around forever. Go to GitHub, download the code. It's there. It's been there forever. Antivirus, I love antivirus, but at the same time, the DAT files change so quickly. I can change the Citadel code. I could put salting. How many people know salting? I can put salting into Citadel code so that a DAT file doesn't recognize it. It's not hard to do. So ultimately, we got into this machine, and we planted our Citadel code. Anybody who wants to go up to GitHub, you can find this on the internet. It's no big deal. Go and find it. Just run through the code. If you're not a coder, I don't care. You can run through. You can still see that it's going and pulling accounts. You can see that it's going calling different APIs, trying to get accounts. Okay. It's not hard. What we'll do, though, as a hacker, is we're going to bundle this together. We're going to bundle a whole bunch of different pieces of code. Citadel, Zeus. We're going to put in some, brute force. We're going to do file scanning. We're going to do some parsing on some file systems. We're going to do all this together so that one of them is going to work. And then whatever one works, we know that that's a vulnerability that I can exploit. And the next machine I go to, I'm going to do that all over again, but I'm going to put a special emphasis on the work. Right? So anyway, they planted Citadel, they got it going, and that allowed us to get access to the remote vendor interface, which is essentially what we do. It was basically a website that we get into, but through that website, we closed a lot of the internal systems, a lot of the internal billing, all of which had web interfaces into that portal. Based on that portal, I was able to get to whatever I wanted to. I say I was able to get bigger. My goal at that point was I'm into the target network, but I'm on into critical systems. Again, I have to spend some time getting an account that's going to allow me into a valuable system. And in this case, the credit cards are stored in the POS system. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the remote interface, a web console. I want to get to the server that is running that web console, which will allow me to get further into that. Okay? And able to get to that credential, I had to obtain some form of privileged access. The privileged access, in this case, ended up being a domain admin. We don't know for sure, but we assume that there was a keylogger installed on that machine, and that keylogger, when somebody logged in, they got access to that machine. How many people know about pass the hash? Okay, so everybody knows pass the hash. We also know that they launched code and ran on that server to grab a hash. Now, everybody knows that once I get a hash for an account, to pass a hash or golden ticket, we also know that I can use that hash across the enterprise. Okay? I can use that on any machine that has a domain admin account on it, that is logged in and has not changed their password. That hash was used to go and talk to the entire environment, and at that point I could go and talk to different systems which were relevant to me, right? Maybe it's a database, maybe not, could be anything. But now I can extract that hash. I have the Kerberos vulnerability, and based on that hash, I can go to domain controllers. If I go to a domain controller, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create myself an ID, and that's exactly what they did. Go up to Active Directory. I create a domain admin, and what can I do once I'm a domain admin or enterprise admin? I can do anything I want. They had full access to do anything they wanted within the entire environment. I also want to note here, this is roughly, and these are all approximate, we don't know exactly, but this is roughly day 36. Okay? So if you look at a countdown, and you can do this for any one of a number of hacks, typically you're going to start at roughly about day 1, and you're going to have about 36 is going to be roughly when they're going to get entry 50 in there somewhere. And then it's basically an exploration for the next 100 to 150 days. The last 10 days are critical because that's when they're going to start doing the data extraction. Okay? And that's when all the red flags start hitting. At this point, nobody knows what's going on yet. Right? I'm in there, I've created a domain admin, I have access to everything, but nobody knows I'm in. No triggers have been fired. No alerts have been set. Everything's legitimate access using accounts that are allowed within the environment. All right. So, I know that the POS system has credit cards. I'm after credit cards. I want some money. It's worth $2 a credit card. So I'm going to install some malware on the POS systems. I have access to domain controllers, and I'm installing rats. You guys know what rats are? Besides little roaches. Okay, rough auditing tool. A lot of what you'll find is that hackers use the same tools that we use against us. You're going to find tools like rats, PSExec, all that kind of stuff. Those tools are good for us, but they're also good for hackers to use. And some of the things that I've found is that they will actually go and find on your store of tools that you use. Hackers will go and file from you as opposed to downloading it from the internet or copying it via their code. So they will do a search. There'll be a dictionary search on your file servers looking for PSExec, and then they will copy that onto a secondary server that they can launch from. Why would I try to copy over myself when I could just use yours? Right. So basically a tool that is used to go and find exploits within code. Fairly simple. All right. So now we're in phase 3. We're on day 50 because kind of the core hack has been finished. And at this point, we're basically clearing up and getting things going. We can listen to all the calls back and forth between all the different systems. We have a domain admin access. We've installed our malware. We've done a lot of different things. We're not really sure at this point. They're in the POS system. This is where they're talking, so we're kind of focusing on the POS system. We don't know whether they created this account or whether this account was existing, but we know that there was a best1_u backup account that they used in that system to copy the data back from the outlying. We're not really sure how they got that, whether they created it or it was existing, but essentially they got this account, again, focused on getting some form of account, getting a password that leverages the whole system that I can get access to. They got it, they got the account, they created a password, either way. And at that point, they are going to automate a data dump. Depending on the type of hacker and what's happening, they're going to do a couple different things here. If I'm a hacker, there's a few things I could do. One is going to be copy this stuff to an internal file server on your network. So I'm going to get it off the target machine onto a file server in your network. That does some really good things because file servers are very seldom recognized or known as attack targets. And number two, I'm off of the main system. And if that main system does get shut down, I still have my data. My data is a valuable part, and that's the part I want to maintain. Then from there, I can break it into chunks and send it out of the network. Or if I want to kind of wrap up my whole hack and just say I want to get my data out, they will start transferring as fast as they possibly can to Brazil and redirect to Russia or wherever they're going to go. I'm going to send that data off. In this case, they launched PSExec to send the data off. And everybody knows this code, so it's pretty straightforward. So basically, we're using tools that are in your system, tools that you guys already know probably, to go ahead and do that. Any questions yet? Illuminating? No? You probably already know this stuff. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's the same thing. I could go through I do actually in the longer ones. I have a half dozen different hacks that I go through, but they're all the same process over and over and over again. Slightly different tool sets, slightly different ways to get the breach. Sometimes Ashley Madison and I talk about it real quick, but you know, I didn't spend a lot of time analyzing this. I wasn't on site or anything, but ultimately it was either a disgruntled employee and or someone who had access into the system for a long time. Okay? Either they were monitoring or they're listening. There was an interview you guys can go and look up, but they've obviously been targeting these guys for a while, past few years. Nobody was watching, no security. There's a segmented network, which is fairly easy, and pass 1, 2, 3, 4 from the internet to the VPN. So obviously, whoever set up the security for this obviously was not looking at the accounts, or know that hackers typically use accounts as a privileged way to get into the network. Same thing, disgruntled employee, good access to the VPN via a hacked username password. Okay, access to some root accounts, and we're going to export the data. All right. Any ideas on how we're going to try to remediate some of this? How we're going to fix it? Any thoughts? Over there. Yes. Sure. Another one. Two-factor authentication, anybody? Everybody uses two-factor authentication, right? I work for CyberArk, and we don't even carry two-factor authentication. So, first thing you want to do is you want to find out, do I have a problem? How many people have service accounts? Right? Corporate guys know that I have service accounts. When's the last time I changed my password on a service account? Assessment, very important. CyberArk, we have a free tool, it's called DNA. It goes out and it scans, and I will scan very large organizations, 100,000 computers. It'll come back with the service accounts, passwords that haven't changed in 10 years. Is the account enabled? Yes. Is it on every single machine in the enterprise? Yes. Would a hacker be happy to find that account that has not changed its password in 10 years? Yes. I would have access to everything. Assess, find out what accounts are out there and what's vulnerable. Pass a hash. It gets invalidated as soon as you reboot. Nobody's going to reboot a server, so scratch that one. Determine what kind of accounts and types are vulnerable. Are my database accounts vulnerable? Do I have third-party code that has hard-coded credentials? Are my IIS servers probably configured correctly? Change the password. Ultimately, you want to salt those passwords. You want to put in some randomized characters. Newer Microsoft code for Kerberos does salt. Is that a question? So you do want to salt your passwords. Make sure you download those updates from Microsoft that allow you to salt your passwords. If possible, divide your data into different computers based on security. I want to create secondary DMZs within my environment that isolate my domain controllers. I don't want them sitting in the wild with all my other servers. I want to create a secondary tier for my database servers. I want them isolated from other servers. Nobody does it, everybody should. How do I isolate them? I can isolate them using jump servers. I can isolate them doing a lot of different things. Look at your workflows. And some of the newer things that we see people starting to do, I know they're more basic, but create honeypots. How many people have created a honeypot for their accounts? Right? Some people have, but very, very few. So you created honeypots for your network maybe for your web servers. You've set up a lot of traps, maybe your tripwires. You set up a lot of alerting on that kind of thing. But you got to remember that if you have alerts set on something that's going to trigger, I have to wake up at 3 in the morning, I have to get the phone, I have to walk to the computer, I have to find out what the problem is, and then maybe I can turn off something remedial. Remember, if I copy code from a domain controller, it's going to take me about 5 minutes, and it just took me an hour to wake up. Okay? You got to think that a programmer or a developer, when he's hacking, he knows that that alert's going to go off, and he knows that he has about 15 to 20 minutes before you actually react. So you have to be smarter, and you have to set traps. So he is tricked before he actually gets to the viable stuff. You have to protect your accounts. You have to protect that security. Okay, that's it. Half an hour. Any questions? No?